Debate in the House of Commons there just hours after Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pledged he's going to eliminate the GST on new homes sold for under $1 million if he's elected. Poilievre says the move would save Canadians about $40,000 on an $800,000 house and would spur the construction of an additional 30,000 homes in Canada every year. To pay for the plan, the leader of the Conservatives also said he would cut two government programs, the Housing Accelerator Fund and the Housing Infrastructure Fund. So why this policy and why now? Let's bring in the front bench to talk about that. Laura D'Angelo is with Enterprise Canada and previously worked in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office. Shakir Chambers is a vice president at Oyster Group. He worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. Kathleen Monk is the former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk and Associates. And rounding us out this evening, Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. Shakir, I'll start with you on that question I said in the introduction, like why this policy and why at this juncture?
I think it's just smart politics, to be honest with you. I think at the end of the day, when people are obsessed with affordability, obsessed with cost of living, when you come out talking about cutting taxes in any way, I think it really resonates with Canadians across the board. I also think it just kind of serves as a reminder to a lot of voters out there that, Pierre has been the guy kind of championing this issue, whether it's through the leadership race or becoming leader of the party. This is a message he's really been driving forward. So again, a gentle reminder to a lot of voters out there. And again, just good branding for him, targeting a key demographic that he's going to need to win if he's going to get a majority. Those people struggling, those first-time home buyers that want to get into the market. And I think also just the effective piece of what you said in the intro, the ability for them to kind of put in the window, you know what, here's what we would actually cut. Because everybody always asks Pierre, what would you get rid of? Or, how would you get the money to pay for some of these things you want to do? And he puts it in the window. These programs that he thinks are ineffective in building homes, that Sean Fraser's on record of saying that they're ineffective in building homes, that's what he would eliminate. So all around really good packaging on an issue that I think is really, really key to a lot of voters out there that Pierre wants to court.
Yeah, the pushback is interesting, Laura, also, right? Because I heard the finance minister in the House of Commons pick up on a portion of what Poilievre said, sort of like, essentially implying that there are other things that he would cut. But he did really he was ready for the question about what are you going to cut to pay for something like this? And it was specific to those two programs. Does that insulate him from the Liberals' primary criticism of the Conservatives or attack on the Conservatives right now, which is you're going to cut everything?
I don't think it insulates him from all of that because he's going to have to cut a lot for all of the programs and changes he wants to make. That said, I think that this helps on this policy specifically. I also think it's great that we finally have him talking about a policy and not just a slogan. You might be surprised. I like this policy. I think this is a good one. I do think it doesn't address the entire housing crisis. It doesn't address housing affordability. It doesn't address existing communities. This isn't going to be helpful for the GTA in the Lower Mainland where people want to live near their parents. They want to live where their jobs are. But I think it's a good start and every little bit helps. I hope we see a lot more of it. And I hope he gets a bit more specific because I think it was tagged at something like $8 billion for this program.
I think that, yeah, from what I was thinking that I might have been interviewing MPs on it, Kathleen, so I studied the costing very closely, and I think Mike Moffat had it pegged at about $4.5 billion. If you subtract what they said the new revenue from 30,000 additional homes a year, it's $2 billion. The scrapping of the programs gets you basically 4 or 5 years through the program, and then there'd have to be questions about sort of what goes on later. But in essence, I mean, if the NDP and the Liberals are continually saying you're not actually talking about what you're going to do, you're just criticizing us, does this work in part to answer that question? Is it strategically, in your view, effective?
So I give Poilievre some points today for coming out with an announcement. Like you just said, it was a pretty slick announcement with the video, the social videos, and his rollout. Almost like taking advantage of the fact that Liberals are on their back heels, and he's almost getting out there campaigning, as in some ways Jagmeet Singh was too with his announcement that he made around abortion access. But the policy itself is dreadful. And I challenge my colleagues on this panel to say how it's good. So you're saying that basically a mom who's going to pick up some chicken fingers and some French fries at the local grocery store for her kid on the way home from hockey is going to have to pay GST on that. Or a young millennial is going to have to pay GST on their internet bills. Or, for instance, a family at home is paying GST still on home heating. That's outrageous as we go into these cold winter months. But Pierre Poilievre is going to let someone who's going to buy $1 million new home get off with the GST. There is a hole the size of a Mack truck that you could drive through this policy, Vashi. It's extremely problematic. He hasn't actually denoted whether it's just for first-time buyers that are buying their principal residence, or if this could be for investors that are going to be able to take the GST off buying their second, third, fourth, fifth home. Meanwhile, totally robbing the fiscal envelope, frankly, for our government by taking that revenue out of government that could be actually invested in building affordable homes, co-op housing, other things. But that doesn't surprise me, because when in fact Pierre Poilievre was the Minister of Housing, he didn't get the job done then either. He doesn't believe in affordable housing or co-op housing. I think it was like a handful of units he built during that time. So this policy is in sync with what he does, how he rolls out his policies, which is targeted at a specific and wealthy demographic, and most likely his corporate wealthy friends that will benefit from a program like this.
I think it's a fair point around affordable housing under the Stephen Harper government and a lack of creation of it, Laura. But I spoke to Mike Moffat today on my radio program, who used to be well acquainted with Liberals in advising Liberals on their housing policy. He's been one of the foremost kind of analysts of all the different types of policies that are coming out. He called this bold. He did not have the same criticism that Kathleen did. Even the government didn't even go so far today in the House of Commons or Minister Fraser to criticize that. I think that the target is not necessarily, corporations, which I understand the concern around, but people who don't feel wealthy, who may in the sort of demographic scheme of things be labeled as wealthy, but who feel like they can't even afford that $800,000 home anymore because of all the other economic factors that they face. What are your thoughts on who they're aiming this at?
Well, I think this was a win for the Conservatives in the sense that it wasn't immediately panned off the bat by experts like Mike Moffat, as you mentioned, Vashi, and the Liberals even said in their scrum today that there are elements of it that they liked, although as Kathleen brings up, they also had concerns, particularly around the cut to the funds and to the investor piece, that people could be buying multiple homes and benefiting from this program. I think this was targeted at younger people, younger voters who might be buying their first homes, who are looking for a bit of a break there. And right now, unfortunately, in certain areas of Canada, $1 million is standard, and it's really not seen as an expensive piece of land. It's not going to work in all areas of the GTA and Vancouver, as other Laura mentioned, but I think it is targeted a lot towards new homeowners, younger homeowners, people who are buying new homes. And I think
Laura's cutting out, so I'll just...
Okay.
You're back. Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. I think just cut me off if there's a problem. I think that, he's trying to present himself as a serious leader now. He's taken some hits, Mr. Poilievre, in terms of, how he's presenting himself to Canadians. There's issues with the foreign interference issue and not taking the security briefing. He's kind of maybe been painted by some of his critics as a bit immature and unserious. I think that was maybe why the timing of the announcement was made today, and the Liberals are hurting a little bit. And obviously housing is going to be a key priority for the Conservatives. So I think that was the ultimate goal today, to present something clear of the window, an alternative, and to present himself as a bit more of a serious character in Canadian politics.
I'm glad Laura brought that up, Shakir, because I was curious as I was watching it. I've been told the last 6 months, don't expect any serious policy. They're going to play the Doug Ford handbook and give you 5 things very close to. They don't have to, because they're so far ahead in the polls. Why do you think they felt they needed to today?
I think part of what Laura said, the message track, kind of get off anything around the foreign interference piece. But I also think the timing plays well in terms of contrasting with the Liberals, right? I think if you look at the Liberal Party for months, and we've been talking about the internal fighting that they're having, trying to get rid of the Prime Minister, that's a story today as well. So if you hear that coming out of the Liberals, what's coming out of the Conservative camp now is, we still remember that housing is a major issue. We still remember there's a crisis in the housing sector, and here's how we're going to help make your life a little more affordable. So I think it offers a sharp contrast to what we hear coming out of the two major parties, and again, a bit of a channel changer, if you will, from some of the criticism Pierre has been getting. But I also think with the Liberals making that immigration announcement on the weekend, even getting that out of the picture, right, and start talking about what the Conservatives are going to do if they form government, and talking about a pocketbook issue.
Yeah, it's interesting that Shakir brings up an interesting point. Like, that is a massive shift in immigration policy that, like, we've now just quickly sort of, I mean, we won't, obviously there'll be scrutiny for a while, but it's true. It sort of like turns the page in a way. Laura, if you're the Liberals, how do you navigate this one?
I think they're doing what they can today. I think that they are pushing back on the holes. They're pushing back on affordability. They're pushing back on some of the challenges of this policy. Like, for example, it doesn't really force the Conservatives to build relationships with municipal leaders, to combat NIMBYism or changing zoning laws and things like that. But I think this one's tough to push back on. To Shakir's point, this is a direct pocketbook issue. It really affects a major voting bloc. It affects a lot of millennials, young people who are trying to buy homes. And I think this one's actually going to be really tough for them, given the criticism on Pierre Poilievre has been really thin on policy. Just quippy slogans, and here he is standing up. A pretty appealing policy to a lot of people.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick commercial break.